Good evening all, and welcome. It has come to my attention that we haven't had a video about truckers in a long time. So in order to rectify this, tonight I present you with 20 true stories from truckers. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I was driving northbound in Utah, heading to Brigham to deliver a load. I get past Ogden, and it just starts pouring like a Texas storm. It also happened to be 8 p.m. and is pitch black outside. I happened to roll by the scene of an accident, where a gentleman was hanging out the driver's side window of a 90s Tacoma, with a white sheet barely covering him and covered in blood. His head was only half attached to his body. The tires of the truck were bald as hell, and given the pole that the truck was wrapped around, it was obvious what happened. Wear your seatbelts, people, and be safe. I don't want to see another semi-decapitation. I passed an accident on I-240 in Memphis a few years ago. My dad was in my passenger seat, and we were in the northbound lanes. In the southbound lane, pressed against the driver, was a white Ford F-150 and about 6 police cars behind it. The Ford was smashed to shit. As we got closer to the accident, I noticed a body hanging out of the driver's window, covered in a blanket. The arms stretched out from under the blanket, and blood was smeared along the side of the white truck. It was a miserable scene. My dad was messing with his phone at the time, and he noticed me slow down slightly as we passed this wreck, and he started to look up. I said, "No, Dad, don't look," but it was too late. He saw the body and the blood, and we drove in silence the whole way home. It was a somber experience. Neither of us talked about it again. Wear your seatbelts, people. This story took place in late 2014. I am a female from Australia, based in southeast Queensland, and truck driving at the time. I was transporting horses all throughout Queensland and New South Wales and Victoria. For some context, at that time of year, a lot of horses had to go to the Hunter Valley in central New South Wales for the breeding season, and there are 2 main roads that I would take. The first road is the New England Highway, a direct south run to the Hunter Valley, just under 700 kilometers. It has a good road surface, but had a lot of hills, ranges, and towns to go up, down, and through, making it hard on the horses, straining on the corners, and the constant changes in speed. The other road was a bit to the west, and about 50 kilometers longer than the New England one, but the one I preferred to travel, as it was mostly flat the whole way, and half the number of towns to slow down for, making it easier for the horses in my truck. When the glitch happened, I was coming home, so heading north on the western road. It had been a long day, but I had a couple of hours sleep and a cup of coffee with lunch. It was about 3 in the afternoon, and I was just leaving the town of Nibiri, about halfway point on my trip. On the north side of town, you would go over the railway tracks. There is a big overpass, and I remember going over the tracks and starting to speed up for the 100 km/h sign, when things started to shimmer, and I could hear a soft ringing in my ears suddenly. I was in a completely different place. The sun was now low on the horizon. There were small lots of land with houses, trucks, and large gardens on either side of the road. I had been speeding when I came to, but quickly slowed back down and pulled off to the side of the road. As I was doing it, I realized I was now on the north side of a town called Gundiwindi. I had planned to stop there to fuel up the truck and get another coffee and some dinner. But I was now on the north side, past the truck stop, and couldn't remember any of the trip from Narabi to here. Let me give you some details of the road between the two towns. First, there's over 220 kilometers, or 136 miles, between these big two towns. There are half a dozen smaller towns, more like a group of houses around a pub, but if you blink you'd miss them, that you had to slow down for and navigate through. Traffic lights, bridges, roundabouts, corners, roadworks. Moore is a bigger town in the middle, and at the time before the bypass was put in, you had to go through the main street that had a couple of hard corners with crappy roundabouts you had to take extra care with, all of which I should not have forgotten. I was freaked out, but still needed fuel for the truck. I carefully turned around and made my way to the truck stop, fueled the truck, parked ticked out of the way, got a coffee and a meat pie, and stayed there in the truckies lounge for a while to work out what happened. I had lost close to 3 hours of time, and I don't think I'd fallen asleep or spaced out or anything like that. It was like I had just driven through a wormhole and came back out on the road. I still had to get the horses to their home, so had to get moving again. The rest of the trip went well, and it was very late to the point of being early when I parked at the depot and jumped on my bunk to sleep. In the morning, while clearing the truck ready to go again, my boss came out to tell me what I had for my next trip. After she finished telling me about my pickups, she said that she had a look at my movements on her computer, from the GPS tracker in my truck to check times, and you may have guessed, it hadn't recorded anything between Narrabiri and Gundiwundi. Safe to say, I went down the other road for the next few trips. In 2003, my son and I took a long trip out west to see national parks and tourist attractions. We drove 6,800 miles in 19 days. We were driving north to the Grand Canyon, and an ambulance passes us, lights and sirens going full. A few miles up the road, we see a debris field on the side of the road ending in a minivan with no door, about 100 feet off the road. Their seats are clearly visible inside and intact. On the road is a body of a woman, well dressed, with a cloth over her face. The ambulance is there with a couple of cars that have stopped, and everyone was standing around looking uncomfortable. Clearly the woman rolled her van and was ejected. No seatbelt, obviously. This was at 8:30 a.m. on a clear day and nearly no traffic on the road. I've often wondered what she was doing. Putting makeup on, talking on a cell phone, changing the radio, putting in a CD. Whatever it was, it caused her to crash. A lot of the debris looked like marketing material, pamphlets, racks, stuff like that. Where was she going? To give a presentation? It all ended suddenly on the side of the road. Wear your seatbelts, people. This story is from my brother. He was at a rest stop once and saw this middle-aged woman in a pink Jeep with 4 to 5 small dogs walking them. He continued about his routine and got into his truck and back onto the freeway. A few minutes down the road, The woman and her dogs goes flying past him, then suddenly makes a sharp left turn, hits the dirt median, and barrel rolls. He stops the truck and runs to check on her. There are dead dogs scattered all over. She is laying in a ditch of water with her head just above. She kept asking him incessantly if her dogs were okay. They were not. She was not okay either, as she couldn't get up. A couple of street bikes buzzed by us speeding. A few miles later, on a connecting interstate, we saw hundreds of flashing lights, and we couldn't tell if it was an accident scene or construction or what. Since I was new, my dad asked me to pull over and switch with him. I got out and saw the bottom half of a human leg still in its shoe on the ground next to us. Further up the road, one of the motorcyclists had fallen off and got run over by a pickup truck. Damn gruesome. A trucker purposefully hit my best friend's uncle while he was on a motorcycle. The trucker ran his pockets, took his ID and his plates, and left him for dead on the road. Even though he was mangled beyond recognition, he was conscious and begged the trucker to leave some ID behind, so his family wouldn't be left to wonder what happened. The trucker laughed and drove away. Somehow he survived, but paralyzed from the neck down. Oddly, my friend's father is also a trucker. The world has been so cruel to that family. This happened about 5 years ago. I live in a remote town in a fairly secluded part of the country. We don't get many visitors, but we do get trucks driving straight through town, as there is no bypass. It doesn't bother us. It's happened all the time. They always have to pass through the same road, which also situates our main store, Walmart, where we all pass for groceries. Now, this particular Walmart is on the smaller side. Anyway, I had just left my house one day and was going over to see a neighbor of mine. We needed to discuss some urgent business concerning the selling of land. As I was making my way over, I bumped into my friend on her bicycle. She was telling me all about her day, how she was getting divorced from her husband still, and all the stuff that went along with that. Generally sharing the woes of a 50-year-old woman who's lost pretty much everything. As you can imagine, it wasn't a fun conversation, but I digress. We were just talking amongst ourselves, and I was starting to get bored of her conversation. I really needed to go and see my friend, as she was already expecting me. So I politely excused myself and let her know that we should catch up over tea in the coming days. She gave me a little smile at the sign of friendship and invitation, and said that she would be over next week. I gladly agreed, and she went on her way, continuing on her bike to do whatever it is that she was going to do. So I went to my friend's house, had the talk I needed to, and was making my way back home. Please note, I was walking. Now, as I was making my way back, I look up the road and there's a hill. It's not a very big hill, but at the crest of the hill, that is when all vehicles tend to slow down, as the descent is the entrance into town. I look up the hill, and there is the lady I was speaking to earlier, coming down on her bike. I wonder if she can see me, and think for a moment if I should give her a wave, but realize that it wouldn't be long before she made it down, as there was still a little bit of a walk to my house, and we may just say hello then, if at all. I absent-mindedly continue my walk down, and I'm just passing a pub when I hear something. There is a truck approaching from the hill. It crests and it makes its way down towards me. And then the sound that I will never forget occurred. I can't even begin to describe it, but it was just a sound of utter destruction. This lady that I had just spoken to, not even an hour ago, was now being trampled by the wheels of this gargantuan behemoth. She went underneath and underneath. Her bicycle was crushed, her body was destroyed, and blood was everywhere. It was like something out of a horror movie. Now, as many of you would expect, the truck slowed down. But you'd be wrong. The truck didn't slow down at all. In my mind, I wasn't sure if the truck driver had seen this lady at all, even though it was the middle of the day, and she was even wearing those reflective jackets. And now, she was being torn apart and smushed along the road. Part of me tries to forget this next part, as the truck just kept on driving, and just as quickly as it had entered our small town, made its way out of it and onto the horizon. I started having a panic attack. I was freaking out hardcore. This lady who I had just spoken to moments ago was now dead, and all in pieces along the road. I recall looking over, her mangled bike a mess on the floor, with the bloody remains of a hand still attached to the handlebars. Bystanders came, dialed 911, and I was in shock. To cut a long story short, the driver was stopped at the next town. There were bits of her body and blood scattered all over the road. They say from his reaction that he genuinely had no idea what he'd done, as when he got out of his truck when the police asked him to, only then did he look down and see the carnage which he had caused. The blood, the flesh, all over the wheels. He also had a meltdown. He was crying and was lost and inconsolable. I don't blame him. I wish there were a moral to this story. It's not like anyone was doing anything wrong. Perhaps the truck driver, for that split second as he was slowing down, absent-mindedly forgot to look and missed my friend completely. Who knows? I don't know if I'll ever know the truth. What I do know is that he was found not guilty. I'm not sure if he ever drove again, as I only loosely followed the case from the tidbits that were told to me from my other friends. But I still feel sorry for him. I don't know if he would ever drive again after that. I know I wouldn't. And of course for her and her family, and the loss that they suffered. It's not easy. All that I ask is to all you truckers out there, please pay attention on the roads, never overdo your hours, and drive responsibly. I think it's the most we can ask for. My grandfather was a trucker, and said that back in the 60s, it was pretty much the Wild West out there on the roads. Another truck had been giving him shit, and running him off the road damn near and whatnot. Well, it being how it was back then, he pulled out the old .45 and let off a few rounds into the trailer to get back at him. It worked, but he ended up in jail, bailed out, and skipped out of that town. He has been a trucker for all his life, and has a ton of other stories, but that one stood out to me the most. My buddy's girlfriend's parents own a trucking business, and one of their drivers never showed up to his stop, and they couldn't get a hold of his phone, so they looked at the tracker and the truck, and he was in a truck stop in California. They called the police, and they went to check it out. He had been robbed and shot in the process while parked overnight. The worst part? was that it was his second to last run before he retired. The owners of the company knew him well and felt terrible because he didn't want the job, but they gave it to him anyway. I was driving in the middle of the night. I was doing a very long shift, and admittedly was over hours. I was running a little late, as my previous stop had taken a bit longer than I had anticipated, and I'd run into some trouble in a gas station, as I'd left my wallet in my chassis, and it took a while to go back, explain it all, and pay, and yada yada. Anyway, point being, I was running late, and I was trying to get to the drop-off point as quickly as possible. I was exhausted and really wanted sleep, but I kept on going, knowing that I was nearly there, and I would be rewarded by sweet slumber soon enough. The roads were empty. This was your typical desert highway, with absolutely nothing around you. The moon was high in the sky, partially illuminating the beautiful landscape as I drove in the dark, alone and with my thoughts. There were times when I found myself almost nodding off, and I had to keep downing that monster to keep myself awake and banging out the mad tunes, as you do. I looked at my clock. Barely an hour to go. I knew I could make it, but I told myself I really needed a cigarette break, and honestly, 3 to 5 minutes would be fine. So I slow down on the side of the highway, making sure that I am safe, and get out and light my cigarette. I stand there and walk around my truck, just doing a check absent-mindedly while finishing my puff. I look about. It's beautiful. There are no sounds other than the wind gently brushing against me, and I feel completely at peace as I suck on my cancer stick. Just before I'm about to enter my truck again, do I look up at the moon and into the distance, and just take in this peaceful scene for a few more moments. That's when I hear it. I hear someone, at least I think someone, in the distance. It sounds like voices in the distance. Is it a car with the windows down? I tune my ears. It's coming from the desert, not the highway. I look out and see some lights pinpointing in the distance. They seem to be approaching. I start to get freaked out. Lights in the desert aren't a good thing. I slowly make my way back up into my truck and turn on the engine. From this higher viewpoint, I look again. The lights are certainly coming this way. I assumed that they were cars, but upon staring at them for a few more moments, did I notice that they certainly couldn't be. The path was all wrong. They were just going all over the place. It didn't seem possible that a motor vehicle could sway that much, and yet they kept on approaching. I estimated now that they must be about a mile away, and I genuinely didn't fancy seeing what would happen when they arrived. I started my truck, but it wouldn't turn on. It was like it was dead. I tried again and again, but it wouldn't turn on. I was starting to brick it. Did my truck break down in the middle of nowhere? Not only was I going to miss my delivery, but these spooky lights were scaring the hell out of me. I looked over. They were getting closer. A growing sense of panic and urgency swept over me as I kept fumbling with the keys, trying and trying again to get this thing started. Nothing. Fear overcame me. It was getting to the point where I was accepting my fate, that I was going to be taken by some supernatural force. The lights, their arrival was imminent. They were getting brighter and brighter, and just as they approached the road, did they zoom past and continue on through the desert. I twisted my head, and they kept on going. They weren't cars. I don't even know what they were. Like pure light, just bounding through the desert at impossible speeds. They kept on going and going, and I stared at them for about 2 minutes, thankful that they hadn't stuck around. I tried turning the key once more, and my truck started. I could have cried in that moment, I was so scared. I wasted no time in driving way past the speed limit and making my destination on time. I'm not sure what it was, but the fear and adrenaline sure gave me the kick I needed, and I didn't need a single sip of Monster the whole ride back. I'm not a trucker, but I do work for a very large LTL freight company. One particular day a couple of months ago, we were running a light sort through our station at around 15,000 packages when we get an email from the hub about a trailer going to be late. Wonderful. So we started to prep for this late trailer, and then about an hour later we got another email saying that the trailer wouldn't be showing up as there was an accident. We figured the highway was closed down and the trailer wouldn't make it anytime soon. Turns out the truck in front of the truck pulling our trailer had a loose brake drum. It fell off, bounced on the ground, and went right through the window, killing our driver instantly. My strict, no-nonsense mum was a bus driver for a tough inner-city high school, and I had the ride with her after a doctor's appointment one day. I have more stories than just this. 2 boys of 17 or 18 started fighting in the back of the bus and started pulling knives, and I just shook my head. I knew what was going to happen. She pulled over, marched back, grabbed those kids and tossed them out the bus without the bat of an eye. The knives were confiscated by my mum and authorities contacted. At least most of the cargo truckers pull can't fight back. She taught me so much about respecting big rigs, buses and vehicles on the road when learning to drive. Give them space. Respect their blind spots. These rigs need room. So if you see one trying to turn, give them some wiggle room. And don't pull up to the line. And just know that some of them are driving a stick shift. I can't thank her enough. Everyone, wear your damn seatbelt. My grandfather was a state trooper and a detective/accident detective. I have 2 interesting truck stories from him. There was a group of college kids driving somewhere for spring break, and being distracted one way or another, they hit a semi. He said when he showed up, 3 of them were out of the car, and one of them was sitting in the back behind the passenger. The roof of the car had been pretty well peeled back, with most of the damage being on the passenger side of the car. The passenger's shoulder was messed up from the crash, and everyone was sobbing. So no one was really being cooperative when my grandfather asked about the 4th individual. My grandfather walked up to the car to see if the 4th guy needed any help, and he said from behind and on the left he looked fine. But when he got around to the front, the whole right of this guy's head was just destroyed. 2. When I was younger, I was helping my grandfather move his old police filing cabinets, and I was digging through his old photos and files, and stumbled across a guy clearly dead laying on the road. It was pretty gruesome. I inquired about the photo, and he said that the trucker had fallen asleep and fallen out of his truck and ran himself over, cutting himself in half. It was the middle of winter, so he froze to the ground. My grandfather said they had to pretty much scrape him off the floor. I am not a trucker, but I heard a crazy story from a buddy of mine when we were really young. There is this one large truck stop in the city that we live in, and we were getting our driving licenses, and they had to do on-the-road training with a driving instructor. The city is small enough that the instructors know a lot of the police in town, and as my buddy drove past the truck stop, they noticed a ton of police cars and emergency service vehicles. They stopped to say hello to the police, and one of them informed the driver ed instructor that a driver got drunk and asked if they could show the kids what happened to people who drink around heavy machinery. He told me that a driver got royally messed up on booze and passed out behind a semi, and as the driver backed up in the morning, he squashed the drunk driver's head like a watermelon and had no clue about the entire ordeal until he was far out enough of his spot to see what he had done. Crazy. I was delivering newspapers in the morning when I come up to a street that's blocked off by the police. They inform me a total of 0.7 miles of road is closed off due to an accident. I later learned that in the middle of the night, a college girl was riding her bike without any lights on, and a truck driver didn't see her. He also didn't notice when he ran her over, and he ended up dragging her body to where he was going. The police had blocked off 0.7 miles of road because it was littered with body parts. My dad is a truck driver and called me really upset one morning about 7 years ago, saying a girl my age, as I was 16, was knocking on his window at 5:10, barefoot and obviously high. She had little to no teeth and hadn't seemed to have bathed in weeks. She was begging for my dad to let her perform sexual services on him in exchange for $10. It made him so upset that he bought her a hot chocolate and a sandwich, gave her his blanket from his truck and $50, and really hoped she wouldn't use it on drugs. I guess he thought of me when he saw her. I don't know. It really shook him. About 20 years ago, I was heading down to Snowshoe on I-80 in Pennsylvania. Flatbed passed me, and after he got about a quarter of a mile in front of me, the brake lights come on, and he started swerving all over, and ended up in the median, upright but jackknifed into the driver's side. Turns out he hit a bear, which went through the windshield. Bear survived, and it went on attack mode. I and 2 other drivers got to him in time to see this bear flapping out inside the cab attacking this guy. Right behind us was a state trooper. He ran up to the truck, yanked the passenger door open, and shot the bear twice. The bear turned around and started towards him, and he unloaded into it. The guy was torn up, and no, he didn't make it. Not me, but my mum's friend's husband was a truck driver, and was on the highway one night. He was driving along and sees cars pulled over the side of the road, but doesn't think much of it since that's fairly common to see. Well, the door swings open and a guy jumps out in front of his truck and kills himself. My mum's friend ended up losing his job because of the guy, and it really messed him up. So if you see a car pulled to the side, try and get into the far lane as soon as possible, not only for other people's safety, but for yours as well. I've always been a bit of a loner, which is why the thought of being stuck in a truck alone was incredibly appealing to me when picking career paths. I really enjoyed being a trucker, and have been one for the last 40 years. There is one story that always comes to mind, and that is the story of Sally. Now, on my truck routes, I would usually encounter lot lizards, those nasty women just waiting to prey on you. It was at one of these places when I was having dinner that I encountered Sally. I'm sure that she was a lady of the night, and when we first met, she was also offering her services. But I told her to sit down and just talk to me for a little while, if she wouldn't mind keeping an old man company. She accepted, and we had dinner, and made polite conversation, and just talked about each other's lives, where we came from, what drove us, why we are where we are today. Honestly, I was just lonely, and enjoyed having the company, and listening about her tragic life. I gave her $50. At the end of the meal, I said I had a nice time, slipped her a 50 for her time, and made my way. It became a recurring thing. Whenever I'd pass by, I'd always go in, have dinner, and if Sally were about, invite her too. Don't worry, I didn't pay her anymore, but we became quite good friends, and she'd tell me all the news and gossip from the area, who'd come, who'd gone, any interesting news and like. We really grew a close friendship. Now, despite her choice in profession, she told me she had a boyfriend that lived in this town, but she never told me the name, just that he was comfortable with her choice of career, although not all of the time, and said that he could become violent. I tried to distance myself from that. I didn't want to get involved with her boyfriend or anything. I just wanted polite conversation when I was about. One day, though, she stopped showing up. After about 2 months' worth, I finally asked someone else if they'd seen Sally around. It took a while, but one of the other ladies said that she had disappeared and that no one had seen her for quite a while now. So that was that. My talks with Sally faded into non-existence. But every time I drove by and stopped, I wished that Sally would walk through the doors so we could have a catch-up and a nice chat like we used to. We never did, though. I was sitting in that very same diner, having some food and watching the news on the TV, when something came on. They'd found the remains of a woman at the bottom of a ravine. My heart fell to my stomach. I knew who it was. I didn't need confirmation. In the weeks that followed, did they match her DNA? It was Sally, all right. She'd been strangled, stabbed, and thrown down, left to die, which she did. It was her boyfriend, the boyfriend with violent tendencies. The first time I saw his face was the mugshot on the news. How could someone be so cruel? I don't know what happened to him. I guess I didn't follow the case enough. I hope he got what he deserved, though. I am not a trucker, but I dated a girl who was. She was short haul, but occasionally had to run loads to a warehouse out of state. When she did, I usually tagged along. We pulled into this nasty, abandoned-looking truck stop right on the New Mexico-Texas border for fuel. All fueled up, we headed inside to see if we could get something to eat. The inside of this place looked like something out of Fallout. Mostly empty shelves with random dust-covered canned goods and old boxes of this and that, lights flickering and making that pinging sound. Not a soul to be found. We grabbed a few bags of chips and waited near the register. After making some noise and waiting for maybe 5 minutes, we put the stuff back and went outside. Surrounding her truck were about 10 guys who looked very scary. Remembering I had left my gun in the truck, my stomach dropped. A biker then rolls up and talks to the 2 guys near the back of the truck for a minute, then does the slitting throat motion. My girlfriend is shaking and close to crying. I'm pretty sure I've already crapped my pants. The biker throws his hands up and tells everyone to move, and walks over to us. He then politely tells us that someone had stolen a trailer of his up north, and he was looking for it. This wasn't the one, so he apologized for the drama. He reaches into his pocket, grabs something, sticks it in my hand, and tells me sorry for the trouble. As he's walking away, I look into my hand. It was a bag of weed. We got out of there pretty fast. Good weed though. We were joking about trying to find him on the way back and get some more. I am not a driver, but work as dispatch. One of the craziest stories we had was there was a driver driving in the middle of the night, and an owl went straight through the windshield. It ended up getting stuck in his chest. He was able to pull over and turn on his hazards. His body was found outside the truck, which looked like he had tried putting out the emergency cones. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's trucker stories. If you guys would like more, feel free to send me some, as I'm all out and I'm not sure when I'll get any more. Anyway, if you did like the video, please do not forget to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. That's always an awesome thing to do, and it goes quite a long way. If you're new here, I do post every night, so be sure to subscribe and press the little bell icon to be up to date with every time I post. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. If there's a story that you would like to share and have read on the channel, please feel free to send it to my email or post it to my Reddit. Either are fine. But please be sure to add plenty of paragraphing, punctuation and description to maximize the chances of your story being selected. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.